In the heart of West Africa lies a nation that many around the world have overlooked, a land rich in history, struggle, and hope. This is the story of Burkina Faso, a country whose people have faced some of the harshest trials imaginable: political turmoil, economic hardships, and the ever-present shadow of external interference. But in the middle of this turbulent chapter, a leader emerged, a man whose courage has sparked a fire in the hearts of millions. His name is Captain Ibrahim Traoré, and this is the story of how he is changing the destiny of an entire nation. The sun rises over the golden plains of Burkina Faso, casting its light across dusty roads and small villages where life begins early. Farmers walk to their fields before the heat becomes unbearable. Women carry baskets of goods to sell at the morning market. The air is alive with the scent of freshly baked bread, spices, and the distant sound of drums, echoes of a culture that has endured for centuries. But behind the everyday life lies a deeper reality. For decades, Burkina Faso has struggled against forces that sought to exploit its resources while leaving its people in poverty. Rich in gold, cotton, and minerals, this land has attracted foreign powers that came with promises of development, but often left with profits and left the people with nothing but empty promises. It was against this backdrop that Captain Ibrahim Traoré, a young and determined soldier, began to rise. His story is not one of privilege. He was not born into wealth or political power. Instead, he came from the soil of Burkina Faso itself, understanding the struggles of ordinary citizens because he lived them. From a young age, Traoré showed a deep sense of responsibility. Friends remember him as someone who would defend others, someone who could not turn away when injustice took place. That sense of justice would follow him into his military career, where he witnessed firsthand the corruption, mismanagement, and foreign influence that kept his country from standing on its own feet. In 2022, as insecurity spread through Burkina Faso due to violent insurgencies and a failing political system, the people's patience reached its breaking point. Villages were abandoned. Markets stood empty. Fear became an uninvited guest in every home. It was then that Captain Ibrahim Traoré decided that enough was enough. With bold determination, he took a step that would change the course of history. In a decisive move, he and his allies removed the failing leadership, promising to return power to the people, to rebuild Burkina Faso, not for foreign profit, but for its own citizens. The streets erupted with both shock and celebration. For some, this was a risky gamble. For others, it was the first glimmer of hope in years. And for Traoré, it was just the beginning of a long and difficult fight. One of his earliest actions was to address the country's dependence on outside powers. For too long, Burkina Faso's wealth had been extracted and sent abroad, leaving little for its people. Traoré began promoting policies to keep resources within the country, ensuring that the benefits of gold, cotton, and agriculture would serve the Burkinabe people first. But economic independence was only one part of the mission. Security was another. Armed groups had terrorized rural communities, forcing families to flee and leaving fertile lands uncultivated. Traoré took a hands-on approach, visiting front lines, speaking directly to soldiers, and showing the people that their leader was not hidden away in luxury. He was standing beside them. International reactions were mixed. Some governments criticized him, warning of isolation if Burkina Faso did not comply with their expectations. Others watched quietly, perhaps curious to see whether this young leader could defy the odds. But among the ordinary citizens, there was a clear sense of pride. For the first time in a long time, they felt they had a leader who was one of them. Not a distant politician, but a man willing to share their struggles and fight their battles. Across the African continent, whispers began to grow louder. In markets from Dakar to Dar es Salaam, in cafes from Lagos to Nairobi, people spoke of Captain Traoré with admiration. Some saw him as a symbol of African sovereignty, proof that it was possible to stand up to foreign control and still survive. The challenges, however, were far from over. Rebuilding a nation under constant threat requires more than speeches and symbolic gestures. It demands vision, strategy, and the resilience to withstand both internal and external pressure. Traoré's government began investing in agricultural self-sufficiency. If Burkina Faso could feed itself, it would no longer depend on imports that drained the national treasury. Farmers were given support to grow staple crops, while new irrigation systems turned once barren fields into green landscapes of maize, millet, and vegetables. Education, too, became a priority. For years, the country's youth had faced limited opportunities, with schools lacking resources and many children forced to leave education early. Traoré understood that without educating the next generation, The dream of a strong Burkina Faso would remain just that, a dream. Programs were launched to train teachers, build classrooms, and provide free access to basic education in rural areas. But perhaps the most striking change came in the way that people saw themselves. The sense of unity that had been weakened by years of hardship was slowly returning. Communities began to organize local defense groups, not out of fear, but out of shared determination to protect their villages. Cultural festivals once again filled the streets with music and dance, a defiant celebration of life in the face of adversity. The international media often framed Traoré as controversial, too bold, too defiant, too young. But within Burkina Faso, he was seen through a different lens, a leader who had restored dignity to his people, who had shown that the nation's destiny should be written by its own citizens. There were, of course, risks. Standing against powerful foreign interests can invite economic sanctions, political pressure, even covert attempts to destabilize the government. But Traoré remained unshaken. In speeches, he often reminded his people that freedom is never given. It is taken, defended, and nurtured by those who believe in it. As months turned into years, Burkina Faso's transformation began to inspire neighboring countries. Leaders from other African nations reached out, seeking alliances based on mutual respect and shared goals, rather than dependency on former colonial power. The dream of a self-reliant Africa, long spoken of but rarely pursued, began to take shape. This is not the end of the story. In many ways, it is only the beginning. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's journey and Burkina Faso's journey is a reminder that no matter how deep the shadows of the past, there is always a path to the light. It is a story of courage, of sovereignty, and of a people determined to take control of their destiny. And as the sun sets over the land, casting a warm golden glow over fields and rivers, the people of Burkina Faso stand a little taller, their hearts a little stronger, knowing that their future, at last, is in their own hands.